Good evening. Welcome. My name is Michael Mercurio, and I am the Executive Director of Cambridge Common Writers, which is an alumni organization for the Lesley University Low-Res MFA program in creative writing. It's my great pleasure to welcome you all here tonight as we celebrate the release of Beneath the Wide Silk Sky by Lesley MFA graduate Emily Inouye Huey. If you haven't already gotten yourself a copy of this book, check the chat, because I'm going to drop a link for you to purchase it through the King's English, which is a wonderful bookstore in Salt Lake City near where Emily lives. This evening, in addition to hearing Emily read from her powerful, beautiful, and necessary book, we'll also be joined by Lesley MFA faculty member Chris Lynch, who was one of Emily's mentors during her time as a student, and by her fellow Lesley alum Andrea Wang, who is the acclaimed author of The Neon Monster, Magic Ramen, Watercress, and the middle grade novel The Many Meanings of My Lawn. Before I turn things over to Emily so she can read an excerpt from Beneath the Wide Silk Sky, though, I want to take just a moment to note that as a poet reading this book, I was deeply moved by the precision of Emily's language. Such precision makes it possible for a reader to feel present in the book. This historical account invites us in and allows us a new and expanded perspective on what history is and how many individual stories have been left out of the official version. Thank you for your willingness, Emily, to share with us tonight. And I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Michael. That's so kind of you. I just want to say thank you to all of you for being here. I've been overwhelmed just in the last little while, just feeling like, here I am, this literally a soccer mom, coming out with my first book, and just to feel everybody rooting for me, it just means so much, and I appreciate it. I'm going to read from the book. This is, I chose not the beginning. You're sort of supposed to choose the beginning, I think, but I wanted to choose something that I'd worked with Chris on, something that I'd done while I was at Lesley, since we're here with Lesley alumni and teachers, and so I've skipped to the part of the book where Sam is the main character. They've just found out that Pearl Harbor was bombed, and she's going to school for the first time the day after that happens, and she's with her brother Charlie and her sister Kiki, and there's a boy that she references a couple times named Bo. He's her best friend, whose dad was really upset after the bombing and said that he didn't want her to spend time with him anymore. So that's kind of the background. Monday's sky was bare and solid, like today was the start of something different, like nothing before had kept its place. Even the road to school seemed strange. How had I never noticed the frosted purple reeds bowing over the deep ditches on both sides? I sat squeezed between Charlie and Kiki in the middle seat of the truck. Charlie hunched down in his bomber jacket, his gloved hands gripping the scuffed steering wheel as the truck bumped over ruts. I took a deep breath and tried not to worry about Bo and Mr. McClatchy. Next to me, Kiki hummed Blue Champagne as she rustled through her bag. The schmaltzy ballad was jarring, so wrong with all that was going on, but all morning Kiki's face had been plastered in an oddly cheerful smile. Now she pulled out her gold tube of lipstick and dabbed her lips, turning them a rich, bright red. I rubbed the toes of my new boots together, trying to scrape the already dried crust of dirt from the soles. Thinking of Bo, I wished I had taken a little more time to comb my hair. "Can I see the paper again?" I asked Charlie. Kiki huffed, and her breath billowing like ocean fog. "Don't give it to her. It's creepy the way she pores over that photo." Charlie frowned, but pulled the paper out from his jacket's inside pocket. "She has to understand what's going on. We all do." "But she already spent half an hour this morning," Kiki started. "Let her be." Charlie's voice was quiet but hard, and Kiki was silent as I unfolded the paper. War. Japs bomb Pearl Harbor. 1,500 killed. The headline spanned the entire width of the paper. Beneath it was the grainy newsprint photograph. I still couldn't believe it. Couldn't make my brain swallow it. Even after seeing the photo before, it made something inside me stop. Real ships. real people, gone, disappeared into black, clotting swirls of smoke. The entire hull of a huge battleship was invisible. Sunk or burned, I couldn't tell. What must have been the deck was gone, too. Only a few broken beams and shards of board still floated, split from the rest of the wreckage. A tower was visible, swirled in dark, foaming smoke. It leaned to its side, 45 degrees, toppling. Caught mid-motion in the photo, but not in real life. Kiki sucked in her breath. It's unnatural, she said. She leaned against the window, and I don't want to see it. Maybe she was right, but I couldn't stop myself. I kept staring at the smoke, scanning the water, hoping to see someone alive, maybe swimming or in a lifeboat. But there was no one, only smoke and light and dark, and the lines that made the photograph both terrible and stunning at the same time. No! Charlie braked to a lurching stop. I looked up and the paper fell to my lap. The Merc's paned glass windows had been covered in scarlet paint. Jap store. And that's where I'm going to end, if that's okay.
Yeah, that is perfectly okay. And I, listening to you read that, even more than just when I was reading it myself, the sounds in, I mean, I'm a poet. I listen for sounds, and sonically, your sentences are just beautiful. They are absolutely beautiful. Even when you're describing the atrocity of the Pearl Harbor bombing and the shock of finding the graffiti on the store. I mean, just absolutely stunning, stunning work. So thank you for sharing that excerpt
Michael.
with us. And what I'm going to do now is share my screen so that we can all partake in a conversation that Emily had with Chris Lynch.
Okay, so you worked on this book. What did you have with you when you showed up at Lesley? How much work?
A bundle of nerves. No.
You left with that too.
Let's see. I had an idea for this novel, the novel that we're talking about today. You know, I had written a couple chapters and I was interested in writing something about my grandparents, right? And it was very different at the time. I don't know if anything that I showed up with survived. I don't think it did into the final book, but some of what we worked on, the thesis, ended up in the book. So,
well, good. Is it 11 years ago, something like that?
Yeah.
When did you leave us? What year?
2011.
Okay. So, yeah. I got to tell you, I'm still, so I hope it made it all the way through. And I hope it's one of these bits that you showed up with, because that makes for a better story. I still get verklempt over the scene where she's hauling around her family's possessions around the town to sell stuff. It was, to me, one of the most moving things I've read in the entire time I've been in the program. It still makes me wobble. So, did you bring that with you? Did you work it up when you were there? And please tell me it is still in there.
It is in there, I think. I think it's still in there.
You think? I remember it better than you do.
Well, no, I'm trying to remember what version. I don't think the part where she's just going around to different houses is in there, but there is a scene with one person who she goes to sell something to that made it in. And I did not show up with that. That was one I wrote while I was with the program. Yeah.
Okay. So that's the basis for a whole other book, right?
Maybe.
In a way, yours is like, in an MFA program, you amount to like a fairy tale story for us. I mean, you came, you brought a certain amount, you worked diligently, you were very integral to the thing when you were there for 2 years, and you made your progress, and you clearly knew what you were getting from what you were doing. Sometimes, it can get confusing. You go, what am I here for? What am I, do I need to take some time off? Am I here at the right time? Am I not here at the right time? you had some tough times while you were there, and you still never seemed to lose sight of the thing you were meant to be doing. Mm-hmm. And then you graduated.
Mm-hmm.
And then you went off and you had, what, 10 or 12 children?
4, yes, 4.
And
feels like 10 or 12.
This would be very helpful for people, especially people who are involved with CCW and want this kind of thing to connect with the likes of you and go, how do you keep your hand in? How do you keep the wheels going when life is happening, when really serious life, and you're not just a passenger, you're driving this life, and it's a very demanding life. And 10 years passed, right? Yeah. Between when you left pulling that wagon and when you landed at Scholastic, right?
Yeah, just about 9 years.
Can you just give us a brief picture of what that was like and how one keeps the wheels on the road during that situation?
Well, I don't know if I'm a great, I'll give you my answer, but I don't know if it's a great answer because
I guarantee you yours is a great answer.
Well, I took a lot of time where I never stopped writing. I always kept writing.
Important people, listen to that part.
I didn't necessarily write towards finishing or publication for some of those periods. Especially when I had new babies or my kids I had one child who had some medical issues.
Can I raise my hand again and call attention to what you just said? I wasn't necessarily writing to publication. I was writing, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes that's what sustains you, right?
No, and I don't know if I could quit. I don't know if it's possible. I think I would, you know how some people need to run? I'm not one of those people, but I think some people need to write or create or, and I actually think all people do, but I don't know. That's just my philosophy that all people need to create something. And so I kept working and I stayed in a critique group, and there were months where, I didn't bring anything and I was just, helping other people, but I was continuing to write, my little things on the side. And then, a few years before I sold my book, a couple years, I would say, I decided I was ready to write in earnest again towards finishing, and came back to it and sort of wrote much more diligently, much more regularly and consistently, and forced myself to write the things that I might have been avoiding writing. And I don't know what it was. There was some part of me that just had lots of feelings about things that were going on in the world. And this was where I kind of poured that into, and finished and sent it out.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah.
Different, because that's one of the things I think you learn is not so much to come in with an idea and have us shepherd it along, and then you find an agent, and then you find an editor, and plunk, there you go. A big part of it is that thing that happens along the way. It probably shouldn't be the book that you brought in there, right? Yeah. And it wouldn't it wouldn't be the same book if you didn't take that decade.
No, it's a totally different book because of the things I cared about when I finished were so different from the things I was. There are parts of it that I can tell come from 10 years ago. Those were the things that, like, I had just lost my father when I came to the program. And so that part of the book really was something that, came from that period of my life. And then the stuff that's more about how we combine patriotism and protest, or how we choose to make our identities when, we can't make some of our own choices. Like, that part of it comes more from what I was feeling when I came back to it. So, yeah.
Yeah, this, I'm going to repeat myself because it was such a good point. What you're describing is what a lot of people need to hear is that you're writing to write.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The writing, see that, I mean, we can't teach you how to publish, as you found out the long way around. But what we can teach you to do sort of is to get to that place. It might be a sentence, it might be a paragraph, it might be a page, it might be a day, it might be a character who pops up, but you get to a thing that gives you that feeling.
Yeah.
It makes you want to pick it up, show it to somebody. It's a feeling that is unmatched anywhere else. You know, and I have children, I have grandchildren, and there's nothing quite exactly like it because this thing wasn't there. And now it is because you did it. Whatever it took, whatever living it took behind you, and whatever it took today at the desk, that thing is there and it speaks to you and it feels good and you want to show it to somebody. And that's a destination in itself. And the ironic thing is that doing that instead of thinking about publishing, sorry about the mixed message, everybody, but it gets you closer to writing a thing that somebody's going to want to publish. Yeah.
No, I think I absolutely agree. I think like the best writing comes when there's something that you harness it's sort of bigger than you, but I don't know, it's like, it feels like you're just harnessing something that, I don't know how to explain what I'm trying to say. Words are not good for me. But yeah, when you harness that something that means so much to you and you can somehow funnel it into what you're working on. And you don't know whether other people are going to care about it too, but yeah, you do. So it comes through.
Yeah, all you can do is dazzle yourself, scare yourself, make yourself laugh, make yourself weep, make yourself unsettled, make yourself confused, and you know you're doing your job. It's not your job to guide the other people to that place that you got to. It's to deliver that place authentically and let them do with it what they will when they get there. But once again, as long as you do that, you do it for yourself, other people are going to come.
Yeah. I miss this, Chris. I miss learning at your feet.
For those of you who haven't gone through the Lesley MFA program and don't know Chris, you just got a taste of why he is such a beloved mentor.
He really is. And he's I don't know if we said this, he lives in Scotland, so that's why we pre-recorded that.
Yes, but you can find his books, once I reopen the chat here, right there. So it's my pleasure now to introduce Andrea Wang, another brilliant Lesley alum. I'm going to add her right here, and author of some beautiful and acclaimed books, including Watercress, which blew my mind when I read it. And a number of other really beautiful books, and you can find them. I just dropped the link to find her books in the chat. And it's a real pleasure to have you here, Andrea. And I'm gonna get out of the way now so you can have a wonderful conversation without the likes of me.
Thank you, Michael. That's very sweet of you. I totally agree with what Chris said. Like I wrote Watercress for myself. Like you wrote this book for yourself, Emily, and never really thought about whether it was going to be a book or not. So
I love Watercress. So I'm glad it all came together, and yeah, it's special.
Thank you. Thank you. I barely know where to begin. I have so many questions, Emily. But first, congratulations, your debut novel. It's very exciting. Do you want to just start by telling us a little bit about the book for those who haven't read the flap copy and your inspiration behind it?
Sure. So it's the story of, I'm terrible at this, by the way, but the condensed version, but it's the story of a Japanese American girl living before the Japanese are sent to camp. It kind of starts around the time of Pearl Harbor and ends around the time that she goes to camp, prison camp, which is what happened. If anyone doesn't know this already, it probably means you've never talked to me. But in 1942, they sent Japanese along the West Coast 120,000 of them to prison camps inland. So it's loosely based on some of the things that happened to my family.
And your inspiration was a photo of your great-grandfather, I believe?
Yeah, so my main character, her name's Sam, the inspiration for her her journey as a photographer, that's kind of her plotline, her interest, it came from a photograph. We found these photographs of my family that War Relocation Authority photographer named Dorothea Lane, she's actually a very famous photographer, she had taken these photos of the Japanese. The government had asked her to take photographs that would make it seem like they were treating the Japanese really humanely and they were really organized and all those kind of things. And there's actually these really interesting communications between her and Ansel Adams, where she's saying, you know, this is not okay. And he kind of says, well, it's important for there to be a record at all. And so he decided to go along with it so that he could make this record. She went along with it for a short time, but they pretty quickly saw that she was taking not the kind of pictures that they'd asked for. She was taking these pictures that showed how hypocritical or, you know, pictures of children, you know, staring at the flag with their hand on their heart, you know, just that really make you feel like this is wrong. And one of the families that she took pictures of was my family, my great-grandfather, some of my aunts, my aunt and uncle and their kids. And so fast forward years and years, those photos were put in, they were made kind of top secret. No one could look at them until after the war, and then they were kind of hidden in archives and stuff. But someone eventually found them, and my aunts eventually went to the Smithsonian to an exhibit about Japanese Americans and looked up and saw this photo of my great-grandfather. And you know, it's not enough just to document, you know, it would be better had it never happened, right? But the idea of having it documented, of someone saying this happened and it was wrong, you know, that's kind of the next important thing, right?
Absolutely.
If you can't stop it from happening, at least that has to happen. And so that, anyway, that was a really long answer, but that's why. Yeah.
No, that's a great answer. And it was a surprise then seeing this photo in the Smithsonian.
That's my understanding from the story I've heard. You know, I wasn't there, but I think they knew his photo was going to be.
What a shock!
Right up in front of them. Yeah.
Yeah, but also kind of an homage, right? I mean, to what your family endured.
Yeah, it's a treasure to have these photos. You know, now we've gone back and we've found a series of them that are about the family, and it's a treasure to have that documented.
Yeah.
Even with the sadness that goes along with that.
Right. And I'm so impressed by how you took that theme of photography and used it as a device for Sam. And she's an aspiring photographer in a time where, you know, in society, women weren't really encouraged to do much outside the home or be more than teachers or something. Not that there's anything wrong with being a teacher, but, you know, and culturally too, you know, as a Japanese American, her father, family was not really keen on her being a photographer. So I was thinking about how your book is not just a book about incarceration, but about feminism too. And, you know, I cried so many times while I was reading this book. And I think I cried during the first chapter when, you know, Bo, her friend, was like, stop making yourself so small. I'm going to get choked up. Can you talk about this theme of, you know, women and people of color making themselves small to be acceptable in society?
I mean, I think what you just said right there. I mean, I think we've both probably had that pressure in our lives. And I think, you know, there is kind of a double whammy when you have your cultural ethnicity and then you're also the broader society, both of those things coming at you. And so it was important to me just to have, I think that's why she had to be a girl, right? You had to kind of have that stacked against her so that you could speak to that, you know, so that you could experience that with her, you know, have that avatar who takes you through what it would be like to live that. You know, I've thought a lot of times about my grandma, who is one of my greatest heroes in the world, you know, and my aunts who, this is my grandfather's sisters, his three sisters, you know, put aside their education and worked on the farm so that he could go to school. And I've thought about that a lot, you know, like that's not fair, you know, that's, we're so grateful, you know, I'm so grateful to them, but at the same time that it doesn't seem fair, you know. And so anyway, so I had lots of questions about it. And I think sometimes when you have questions, you write to just
process.
Yeah, to process.
Yeah, absolutely. And I see that Sarah in the chat asked, are the photos in the book? And that was one of my questions too. I have an advanced reader copy, but the photos you describe, that Sam describes in the book, are just so vivid, you know. And how much of that came from Dorothea Lange's photos? How much of that was what you imagined, etc.?
So, Sarah, hi. None of the photos are in the book. Yeah, they're not printed in there. I should put them, they're all public domain, and I should put links to the National Archives so that people can see that on my website
great.
Or something like that. Some of the photos are real photos. So for instance, like the photo I described in the reading I did at the beginning, that's a real photo from the news at the time. Let's see, there's another photo that she describes in a magazine. I think that's also from a real photo. And then some of them are just from my imagination, because I couldn't find the ones I needed in the National Archives, so I had to make them up.
Right.
Yeah.
But are you a photographer? Because you talk about the process and the framing of the shot. It just seemed so true to a photographer's perspective.
I wish I were a photographer. I took photography in high school, and I really loved it, and I really loved the process of it. But no, I mean, I take photos with my phone, but that's about what I do, unfortunately. Yeah.
But you describe it so brilliantly. And I think I saw on your website a black and white photo of that sign in across the storefront that said, I am an American.
Yeah, and that's one of Dorothea Lange's.
Oh, that just got me right in the feels. There's a lot in this book about what it means to be an American, right? And I feel like Michael said earlier how necessary your book was, and I totally agree. And I feel like it's so timely. But at the same time, I've been mentioning the rise in anti-Asian violence to just people that I come into contact with, my acupuncturist, etc. And they're all like, really? Like they just don't see it. And so I just want to say thank you for putting this book out there. I really hope that more people read it and learn about this time period, but how hard it must have been to do the research, right? Can you talk about that a little bit? It was a very intense read for me, you know, like I couldn't put it down, but it was also really hard to read at times. So the process of researching it, what was it like?
It was emotional. I had, as you know, I've been working on this for forever, so I had lots of time. But no, it was very emotional, and there were times I was just angry, like, you know, and you can channel that. You can, you know, having something to do with it was really sort of saving rather than just having to sit with it, but instead to be able to, you know, I'm having a conversation with myself. I don't have any idea whether anyone else will ever read this, but you know, still having that conversation with myself still is a processing, right? And I would say some of the hardest things, the hardest things are the first person accounts, and some of those, you know, were my family's. Like I read my grandfather's journals, and it was really hard to read those. And you know, when you read fiction, you generally get at least some sort of catharsis and you know, some sort of triumph, you know, and it was hard to read his things that were happening at the time, and they didn't have, they weren't tied up in a fictional narrative or even a narrative that comes later, but were, immediate. And to see him just feel, we talked about women and how at the time they had so few options, but men at the time too, the Japanese man, he had graduated from Stanford. He was valedictorian of his class. He was so, he had all these hopes and dreams of being successful and all these things like this. And then no one would hire him.
Yeah.
And I think some of that stayed with him. I was talking to a cousin just the other night after I talked about this in person at another event. And he said that when he became a lawyer, my grandpa said, "How did you do that?" As if, he had kind of held on to that feeling of like, is it even possible? And
wow.
And that's hard. That makes you sad. You love them and you don't want them to have those kind of experiences. So
right. I mean, I have been doing similar research. I have a picture book biography coming out in a couple of years about a Civil War soldier named Joseph Pierce, who was Chinese American. And we don't hear about the people of color who fought in the Civil War. And reading about the time period, the newspaper articles, the headlines, all of the anti-Chinese, rhetoric and everything is just, it's really hard. You kind of have to step away for a little bit and then come back to it.
Yeah. Well, and it's especially hard, don't you think? Because it doesn't feel completely past.
It's not. We're living through it right now.
Yeah. I mean, it's, when I finish this book and send it to my editor or my agent, like, it's actually worse now than it was at that moment. Specifically for Asians, I think that kind of uprising wave came through after I'd finished the book. And that's been hard. You kind of want to feel like we're progressing, not like we're kind of taking a step back, and that's hard. Yeah.
Right. But I think we have to hold on to the fact that our books are shining a light on what is happening right now and drawing parallels. Right. You have that in your author's note, that this is going on right now. And what do we choose to do with that? I thought that was so powerful. Like, you wrote, "I chose to write about the time before the internment because in a way, we're always at a point before injustice." Can you elaborate?
Yeah, I guess I feel like we're always making choices about how we're going to define our time, what we will allow to happen on our watch, and as a society and also as individuals, what we do when things happen. Like, that's something that someday our kids will want to know, like, what side of this were you on, and so I think for one thing, so this book is kind of about the time leading up to those imprisonments. I think there are already some really wonderful books about that actual incarceration. But also I feel like, for me, as someone who was watching things in the news and things, I feel like we aren't totally to the place where we're already doing this super terrible thing. We're kind of at that point where we're making those choices. And so that's what I wanted to explore.
Yeah, and you do it so well. I think all of your characters are so well-rounded. I didn't feel like there was one flat character. Everybody felt so fully fleshed out, I mean, especially her whole family. I mean, Samantha herself, Sam, but Kiki, I was really intrigued by, her older sister, who, adopts sort of this approach where she's going to kind of deny what's going on around her, even as all of the tensions escalate in their town, and all, the violence escalates as well. And she is doing that thing where you've been judged by everybody around you negatively for so long that you're doing anything you can to separate yourself from even other people in your own community. And I think that's what I found so fascinating with that. She's saying, "Oh, I'm more American than these other Japanese people," And I just, yeah. I don't know what the question was in that, but I was really so true to life, right?
I think we all do that, right? I think on the bad side of humanity, it's very normal to say, this is what makes me different from this person, and this is what makes me different, and to try to find ways to feel superior, maybe to a different group.
Yeah.
But I think, you know, we actually just were at the World Trade Center with our kids, and we, you know, said, you know, this was a time when we all remembered that we're all in this together, you know. Yeah. And I think we still are, you know, we're still all in it together. And if we can stop, not to say be colorblind or something, you know, obviously it's important to know that different people have different experiences and to try to make ourselves more aware of all the different experiences that people have. But to remember that, you know, there is no such thing as like, I'm this group and that makes me better than you. That, you know, I think that's important. And it's part of why we read, to experience what it's like to be someone else and to have that experience so that we can see them as being just as human as we are.
Right, right. We're giving readers that window and that sliding glass door, right?
Yeah.
As Rudine Sims Bishop says, to have people who don't share perhaps our culture, our heritage, step through and see what it's like. And, you know, thinking about it, the tension in this book is just incredible. Like, it doesn't let up. It starts in chapter 1 and things escalate from, you know, the small microaggressions that happen in school rapidly to, you know, I mean, the whole book takes place over a span of a few months, right? But so much happens. And yet, and it's tragic and sad, but at the same time, you manage to infuse a lot of hope in it. And how did you do that? How do we find hope in the darkness?
That's a big question, Andrea. No, I think when I look at my grandparents, it would be impossible not to approach it with hope. My grandma especially, I would say, you know, she was a person who she found the humor in things. You know, she'd tell us about when she got married in camp, and you know, it was kind of shocking to hear that your grandmother got married in a prison camp, and there were things about it that were awful, like how cold it was, that they were in this tiny little room all scrunched together because that was the only place they could do it, things like that. But then she would remember things like that the Reverend had just eaten garlic, and that so they were in this tiny little room and she could smell, you know, that was her story about what had happened to her. And I think one of the things that was so important to me about this book was that if I was going to write a story about this person who had these choices taken from her, who was going to have something horrible happen to her, like that was historical and I couldn't get around that. It mattered to me to show that even when horrible things happen to you, in a certain way, your story is still your story, and you can choose who you are. And because I think that kids and teens, you know, even as children and teens, have things happen to them that are not fair and are traumatic. And, you know, for that kid who's reading this and has something horrible happen to them, you know, that's what, you know, I hope they'll get out of it, is this idea that we can still have those choices.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And I think that was a heartbreaking book, but heartbreakingly beautiful too, was this love story that Sam has. And I think Michael's saying we should shift with one. Was there a question from the audience? Michael, was there you?
Yep, there was, and what I'm going to do is shift the view and give the audience a chance to hop in, chime in with questions or reactions. I do want to start with Karen's question that she put in the chat. Karen, if you are comfortable posing it verbally, you can feel free to hop in and do that, or just let me know and I'll read it. It's up to you.
Thank you, Michael. Emily, thank you. Andrea, I'm just so taken by your story behind your story. Thank you. I'm curious about how you created such round secondary characters. And I know that's a huge question, but any story behind that or any little tidbits, especially for those of us YA writers?
Is there you've read the book then?
No, I have not.
Oh, okay. So, but in terms of secondary characters, how do you
Yes.
make them round? Okay. I think for me, one thing I do with all my characters is I actually go to method acting, and I go to some of the Stanislavski methods for creating characters, and I do that even with my secondary characters. A lot of it never makes it, I don't go nearly as deeply for the secondary characters as I do for the main characters, but being able to find something in them, the idea of using physicality or digging down into their stories and the things that inform that physicality, I think helps us to create characters who feel believable, who don't, who aren't like super obvious, where it's like they're so predictable, but they still feel real. They don't feel like they are jumping out of character. So that's one of the things I love to do, is go to those method acting techniques. I would just Google it. You don't need to like read the whole Stanislavski. I would just Google method acting techniques and do that version for writing. That's plenty. So yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Great. We have another question in the chat from Julie. Julie, since you have your camera off, I will go ahead and read it for you. Or no.
I have my camera on. I just was eating my pizza. So I didn't want to.
Hi, Julie.
Hi, Emily. Okay, so Emily, I'm so excited to be here because I was part of your critique person at Lesley in like early chapters. So I'm so excited this book has like come to life. So what I wanted to know is, since you left Lesley and you had so many beautiful children, how did that affect, or did motherhood impact how this story evolved, or how you interacted with these characters in this story at all?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And it's so good to see you, by the way. I think I'm a different person completely than before I had children. And so it's not even possible to kind of separate that. On the one hand, the first thing I did is that, I took a big break from it, and that certainly affected it. And then beyond that, I think it matters more to you as you imagine things like this happening to your children. And, my kids are now in elementary school, and they have sometimes had things happen to them. And that feeling, that rage that you have when something like that happens to your child. I think that's another thing I hope this book isn't just rage, but that's another thing that, sometimes is channeled into it. You find you want to say something because you want people to understand how it makes someone feel, and how it, how human, everyone, how human these people are. And I think there's a part of my core that believes that every person, if they could really feel what another person was feeling, would never try to harm them. I really believe that. And maybe that's just sunshine and rainbows, but that's how I feel. That's something core to who I am and what I believe about people. And so, when things happen, or when I have something to say, sometimes I get on Facebook and I write it, and then I delete it, and I go and I write in my book, and I, save it for a place that you can explore it in more depth than, whatever, 140 something characters, whatever it is. So,
yeah. Can I add something?
Yeah.
I think that love of family really shines through in the book. There are choices that Sam has to make, and she chooses family over and over, and that really guides her actions, right? And it's beautiful. So there's a lot of love in the book, as well as rage and grief. All the big feelings. It's such a good book.
Thank you, Andrea. Yeah, and I think I wanted, it's a story for me of my family, and so that's why it mattered so much. Enough to, spend years on it, thinking about it. So yeah.
So Sarah John has a question in the chat asking how old the protagonist is, and did you have any relatives go through this that were the same age as your protagonist?
Hi, Sarah. I did not have any relatives exactly this age, and that actually really mattered to me. My oldest, the oldest child at the time they went to camp was 10, and then the next person was in their 20s. And it mattered to me because they're still around, and you know how even when you do your very, very best to write a story, there is an inevitable flattening to get it into a book. And you can do your best in all the research and make it as true as possible, but there's a flattening. And there's also something that happens where when you tell the story, it becomes kind of the narrative that people remember, and they are still around, and they are so vibrant, and their stories are so round and multidimensional, and I didn't want to tell their actual story. I wanted to go to fiction, and I think someday, it'll be important to write the actual stories. And I mean, there is some of that already done for, like, my grandparents are gone now, and we've done some of that. But yeah, so I intentionally both love this age. I'm a teacher by trade, and I love this age, and I think it's a fascinating age to deal with questions like this. But also, I did not want to write anyone's exact story. Just because we're in a group of writers, probably it's okay to write people's stories. It's okay if that's that was my personal choice. But I'm not saying no one should. It was just I had my own tentative feelings about that. So,
well, I would think it also probably helped you to have a little bit of distance, to have a little bit of daylight from the story itself.
Yeah.
Especially knowing how challenging it was for you to do the research, to confront that legacy, to constantly be trying to recreate a world in which someone that you are related to was suffering. To me, sounds incredibly difficult. So having that little bit of distance, I suspect, helped you to envision this world as fully as you did. And I mean, I mentioned this earlier, all of the descriptions in this book are so precise and so deeply considered, and it feels like I felt like I was there. I know it's cliched to say that, but I really have a different understanding now than I did before I read the book.
Thank you, Michael. I think that's the power of fiction, right?
Yeah,
the power of fiction. We can hear these statistics of things that have happened to people, but fiction or narrative, it gives us the chance to experience it with them.
Yeah.
And one person who we've really experienced can affect us more deeply maybe than any statistic. So yeah.
Yep. Yeah. We have any other questions or reactions from folks in the audience? Angelica, you've got your hand up. Please feel free to jump on in.
Let's see. Hey, I read the book and I just was so impressed, Emily. And I just wanted to add to, like, I love the element of family conflict. Even though, you have, how much she loves her family, but they have that inevitable conflict and different personalities, and, the generational thing with the father being a first generation immigrant versus, the second generation thing. And I loved how, the different layers of conflict with the family and society, and also within herself, how much conflict. So it was just like conflict, which is great. And like you mentioned before, with attention too. And then I just, something that really stood out for me was when Sam, she's concerned about what her siblings are doing. Like, why are you doing, her brother was dating this spoiler alert, I guess. He was doing something that was not good, and then her sister was also doing something that was not good, and then she has this moment where she realizes, actually, those things, they should be able to do that. So at first she was like, well, why are you doing this? And this is just harming our family. And then she's like, no, wait, you should be able to do that. And I just love that. I think that just in life, sometimes we have those similar situations that, oh, you shouldn't do that. But actually, they should be able to do that. And I just love that. So I just wanted to give another plug, and just everybody should read this book. So just awesome job, Emily.
Oh, thank you so much.
No, actually, I do have a question. So some of those insights that you had, do you feel like you got those as you were writing? Being in the story, and then just being like, yeah, I mean, seriously, what is this?
Yeah. No, yeah, for sure. I think you discover yourself when you're writing. You discover what you really think about things. You also discover, some of your own, like, entrenched ideas that you have just grown up with and you don't realize even are, sort of engaging you, or things like that.
Right.
And then I think also, like, the books, just to be able to approach a question, it's always more interesting to write to a question than to an answer you already have. So
yeah. Oh, I love that. That's a quotable. I love it.
Thank you.
Thanks,
so
sweetie. You're awesome.
We do have some folks commenting in the chat, so please be sure to look at that. And Emily, I will definitely make sure you get a copy of the chat after this.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
appreciate it.
So, and any other folks who have questions or comments who are camera shy, feel free to drop them in the chat. I'm happy to read them if that's cool with all of you.
I think Kenji had a question.
Yeah, Kenji, please.
You wrote it in the chat. I mean, I could read it too.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So Kenji really loved the book and would like to know, as you look back on the years you spent working with it, what are some of the things you learned about yourself, family, or about the craft of writing along the way? It's a great question.
It's a big question. Thanks, Kenji. What are some things you learned about yourself, family, or about the craft of writing along the way? Well, since we're in a writers group here, I know not everyone is a writer here, but a lot of us are, given that this is a Lesley thing. One of the things I've learned about writing is that it is, it's about the wrestle. That's what I would say, is it's about the wrestle. For me anyway, I've learned that obviously I'm someone who graduated in 2011 and it's 2022. This is my first book. So there was a lot of time there where I wasn't necessarily trying to publish, but there was also time there where, I was trying to finish a book and I wasn't happening. Like, it was hard. It was, I wasn't sure where to go with the book. And what I've learned is that just wrestling with the page in and of itself is valuable. Wherever it goes, when I started this book, I went to this little conference, and this editor who I got to speak with as part of the conference asked me what I was working on, and I told him I was working on this book about my family, and he said historical fiction doesn't sell, and then he proceeded to say, maybe you could add some vampires or a werewolf or something, which you can see what time period that was. But I think, that's true a lot of the times when we start writing something, it may or may not have an audience. And that is completely outside of our control. Whether it's publishable at the time, is completely outside of our control. But that's not the only reason to write. And so that's the big thing I think I've learned from this process. It's a good question. I got to think about a lot of that. I've learned a lot about a lot of things. About my family, just to add one more thing, what I've learned about my family is I'm so grateful for how resilient and strong my family is. And it's not fair that they had to be resilient and strong, but I'm grateful for them and I love them. And doing this process of writing about these things and researching it, it's helped me know them better. And that alone is such a gift. So I'm grateful for them.
Yeah. There's a recent New York Times article about cultural bereavement. And I think that I've been feeling that personally lately. But I feel like both of our books, or all of our books, are sort of addressing that bereavement, right? That loss of our cultural heritage and in some ways our identity. And that, personally, I'm trying to learn more Mandarin to get back some of that connection. That, we've lost some of our elders and we've lost our relatives and our parents and stuff. So,
yeah.
I think,
sorry.
No, go ahead.
Oh, well, I was just going to say, I think, also being in this country, you have that. I mean, it was almost literally said to my grandparents that, you should forget this, this is, do what you can to be American, so that things like what just happened to you don't happen again. And that's changing. That conversation is changing. And, I see that in my family. We're all wanting to know more about where we came from and who we are as a result. So, but I've got to read that article now.
And then we can move forward the more we know. So thank you.
Well, thank you.
Oh, you found it,
Michael. You're so fast.
Wow, that's super fast.
My day job is in a library, so I'm fairly handy with these things. And I made sure it's a gift link. It should work for all of you. I realize it's a long, ugly link, but if you don't have a Times subscription, this should let you read it as an unlocked article. So feel free to copy that, paste it into a browser, and read it sometime after this is over.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I do want to say, speaking of my day job, working in an academic research library, that I really appreciated the question, Andrea, about the research process that you brought up. Because, this book was, those of you who haven't read it, when you read it, you will understand how meticulously researched it is. And, researched not in the sense of, scientific research, but creative research, the kind of research that you can do in an archive. And, one of the things that I find myself talking about frequently is, archives are not a neutral space. And archives have traditionally told stories of people who have held power and who have been important in the sense of, having given a lot of money to university, for one thing. And that's another reason that I love this book, because it is telling a story that has not been told, obviously, in an archival or even in an educational sense, really. I mentioned to a friend of mine that I was doing this book launch tonight, and she said, I don't know anything about the Japanese internment. I never learned that in school. And I said, well, I have a book you can read that'll get you started on understanding that. So I do want to honor that Julie dropped a question in the chat, and it's an important one. So I think we should make some space for it.
Shall I read it?
You can read it. I can read it. Julie can read it.
Julie, let's let Julie.
I'll read it. Okay, I'm just curious. I know, like, when I had young children, I was like, I can't think enough to write, and I was just curious, as you had 4 young children, how in the world you were able to create the mental space to write and research like you did.
Well, as I said in that little clip with Chris, I did not always have the mental space to write, and there were times when I just didn't work on the book. I never stopped writing. I always kept writing, but it might be little things, little stories just for me or something, just to practice. And there were times when it is really hard. It's really hard to hold everything in your head. Mm-hmm. Maybe some people find that easy. I think there are some people. I live in Utah, where Brandon Sanderson lives, and he'll talk about these worlds that he holds in his head, and I don't get that. That's not my experience. My experience is, I've got to write a few notes so I can remember, and for me, it's a wrestle, like I said. But I would say that one of the things that really helped was when I got serious and I said to my husband, I want to finish. I think this is something I want to do. My kids were just a little bit older by then. And he helped me, so I don't know if Rob's on here, but if he is, he helped me, and he would sometimes help at night, take the kids to the park or something for an hour, so that I could have at least an hour, with no one knocking on the door and wanting a snack or whatever. And so that's one thing that helped, was just having support, and I'm grateful to him for that. So other than that, I think it was just learning to deal with it and say, okay, we're going to get interrupted 4 times an hour, but I still want to finish, and I'm just going to still do it. And yes, I'm going to come back and forget what I was working on in this paragraph, but that's just the phase of life I'm in right now. So, yeah.
And I feel like when you're that deeply enmeshed in a book, even if you're not actively writing it, some part of your brain is writing it and marinating over it and finding the right word.
Yes.
The right scene.
Yeah.
So that when you do come back to the computer, it is there.
Yes. And often it's come up with something, well, you think it's come up with something better than what you were working on before. Maybe it's not better. Maybe it's just new and shiny, but it's good. So thank you.
All right. Well, unless anyone has a final or closing thought, I'm sure right now somewhere in Scotland, Chris is sitting bolt upright in bed, ready to say something. Alas, he's not with us. Sorry, Chris. I want to thank all of you for being here tonight to help celebrate Beneath the Wide Silk Sky. Also, before we go, I just want to say I love that title. I mean, God, what a gorgeous, gorgeous title, and what a gorgeous, gorgeous cover. It really is just a beautiful, beautiful book. I am going to drop some links in the chat for you to copy down. The way to get Emily's book through King's English, which is I haven't been to Salt Lake in probably 20 years, but I have fond memories of wandering through that bookstore and finding so many cool things there.
It's the best.
Yeah,
it's been there forever. It's the best. Yeah.
Give them some love. Buy the book through King's English. The link to get Andrea's books and the link to get Chris's books are also there. And if you are interested in what the Lesley MFA alumni community is up to, whether you're a Lesley alum or not, The Cambridge Common Writers link is there. If you are a Lesley alum and you're not connected to us yet, shoot us an email. We'd love to have you on the site. We'd love to hear from you, know what you're up to. No matter how long you've been away, we have wide open arms ready to welcome you back. So, and again, thank you everyone for this. Thank you, Emily. Thank you, Andrea. Your conversation was fantastic, and I'm already excited to revisit it when we get this posted on our YouTube page.
Thank you. Thank you so much to everyone. Thank you so much. And it's so fun to see you guys. So fun to see you. It's been too long for a lot of us. So thank you. Thank you to everyone.